Hello and welcome to Apart Together. My name is Bruce McCormick and I am an assistant professor of practice at the USC Glorya Kaufman School of Dance. With me today is artist in residence Doug Varone, who choreographed a new work for our upperclassmen this semester. Doug Varone is an artist who works in dance, theater, opera, film, and fashion. He has been directing his New York-based company, Doug Varone and Dancers, for the past 35 years. The company has received 11 Bessie Awards and has performed in 125 cities and 45 states across the US and in Asia, Canada, Europe, and South America. With Doug as their leader, they have devoted themselves to the humanity and virtuosity of dance and have earned the reputation as one of the most respected dance companies working today. Welcome, Doug. Thank you for taking time to chat with me today.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. I'd like to just jump in and start talking about process. I've had the pleasure of being a fly on the wall as you've been working with the dancers, and remember the conversation you had with them on the first day of rehearsal. You shared a bit about your background and your company and the type of rehearsal environment you'd like to foster. And then you had them each create individual phrases from a list of instructions, like spin to the right, curve around a large corner, develop a thrust. Is this similar to how you usually start a process? And can you talk a bit about that choice in particular?
Sure. It's very similar to how I work in process with my own company. I um, I am very much a choreographer who builds a stew of material, I call it, constantly working with the collaborators in the room to create material, whether it's from my own body, whether it's through suggestions or prompts. And usually there is an idea behind that, some seed back here that I think is of interest. So I will guide those prompts in a certain direction to hopefully garner the kinds of material that I think might be useful in terms of the type of project I think I want to create. So working with the students on the first day was no different. The only difference is that I didn't know who they were. So I'm also using that as an opportunity to find out what kind of creative brains they have. Where does that imagination take them to? Who hears and instructions literally, who delves in a little bit more differently, so that I get a sense of the palette of artistry that's in the room to work with.
Can you say anything about that palette that you discovered with this group?
Well, I think from the first day I was kind of blown away a little bit. I was really what's the word I'm looking for? I was moved in a way by the kind of the depth of how they were using their bodies to craft the imagery. And I say that because the work that I create has an emotional depth to it. It always has for the many years that I've been making work, and I'm drawn to that kind of scripture in the body, the way our souls tell us how to create material based um, on suggestions that might elicit something that has an emotional context to it. And sometimes it's rare when you're working with young artists to get that. It takes more drawing out, and I was moved to find that it was so instilled in most all of them. So that was kind of thrilling, actually.
Yeah, I actually remember one of the students asked you on the first day in that conversation what you needed from them, and you simply replied, "We all needed each other."
Yeah, yeah.
And so, what can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think the art of dance making is a collaborative art. That said, I do think that there's a difference between collaborating and choreographing. But the room is, it's a sanctuary for me, and having artists in the room that I trust and who trust me is what the process is all about. It's about being able to be vulnerable with each other, to be able to make mistakes, to be able to look ugly, to be able to be like completely vulnerable at that point where you don't think that what you're creating is worthy, but understanding like deep down that it has very different essence from what you're feeling and then what we're seeing. Um, and also as an artist to, for myself, being the guide here, to be able to also be as open with them as they are with me. I've worked really hard with my own dance company to foster a really safe space of creativity. And that that has come back to serve the work that we create tenfold, because the ownership over the material and the ownership over the choreographic process feels shared within the process itself. When push comes to shove, I'm finding the ways to get us to the places that we need to be. I feel like I'm the weaver. I'm the eye on the outside that's constantly living with the piece for 24 hours a day, figuring out how to manipulate what they are giving me in order to put a piece together that makes sense with integrity from beginning to end.
And what role would you say style plays in that process?
Well, I work within a style. It really has come out of the way that I move as a dancer, and I've always moved as a dancer. I've always very much been drawn to kind of the blur between the technical aspect of who we are as dancers and who we are as people and pedestrians, and that in and out, that blur, I find fascinating. There's a humanity underneath it. It's non-performative in any way. So I'm always looking for the essence of who's underneath the skin to come out. And that style is infused in everything that I do. So even from day one, working with the students here, and I don't know that we ever talked about it. I know that they saw the work that I create with my company through videos. But I felt right from the very beginning that there was an understanding of what I was looking for. Um,
Yeah, and actually, I remember you've said so many beautiful gems throughout the course of the process. And one of them that stuck with you was, we don't need to add a dramatic quality to it. The quality
yes,
of being is
yeah,
enough.
yes, being is it. As I said, it's not performative at all. As soon as the simplicity of what we're creating becomes precious in any way, the work becomes melodramatic without even intending it to be. So it's all about scraping away and just allowing the material to be as honest as it can be. And as a result, you become honest.
I love that. You mentioned that you did film work in your early career and are now revisiting it because of the pandemic. And you also said that your dances often have cinematic elements to them, even if they're for stage. Can you share a little bit about that, as well as what your cinematic influences may be?
Sure, sure. Well, I'm a huge cinephile. I always have been. From being a very, very young kid. I lived inside MGM musicals from the time I was 4, and I've just always been a student of film, film noir, Hitchcock films. I devour them, and I devour them for their visual sense as much as their dramatic sense. So I began, I would say, maybe in the early 2000s, bringing film work into my dances and creating dialogues between what's happening on stage and what is happening on the screen, and allowing that dialogue to interact in ways that felt unique to me, um, but using filmic ideas to bring that to the fore. So I created several works like that, and eh, eh, for some reason stepped away from it. I think if I had stayed with it, my path might have changed radically. I always say that I probably would have been a filmmaker if I was not a dance maker. I see the world through a lens, and in that lens is movement. And I think, it's when you think of, some of the great film directors, they're also great choreographers like Bob Fosse, is fantastic film director because he understood the frame from a dancer's and a choreographer's perspective. So as we begin kind of working on this film that we're creating, I am, I'm thinking in terms of not only what I'm trying to achieve filmically, but how that lives side by side to the score that we're using, and how that the imagery that we are creating can be matched cinematically to what we're hearing. And that can be done in a bevy of different ways. It can be done through editing. It can be done through the qualitative shifts of camera angles. So I think that's what we're exploring this week is how can we make this material that we've created as potent as possible in terms of the camera.
Can you also talk a little bit about the intimate spaces of the dancers and how that is almost a character in this work?
Well, I'd like it to be a character in the work, and I think we're currently in the process right now. I think we're finding out what that means. I very much want to contain them to indoor spaces. So not that there's a claustrophobic element to it, but that there is an intimacy, as you said, that they are the environment and the environment is them, and that it guides them to make certain creative choices. So, as we begin working, I'm looking for the architecture in their rooms to build off of, the types of furniture that they have, the corners, the staircases, anything that for me elicits storytelling that I can pull and draw from. I'm constantly seeking. So I'm always asking them, tell me, take me on a tour of your home. What's up that staircase? I need to know. So it's been an ongoing process of learning about their space so that I can learn how best to use it.
Things we never would experience were not for the pandemic.
That is right. Yes. Yeah.
Um,
As we're looking at each other's homes right now.
exactly. Just to shift gears, what else are you working on these days, either recently or upcoming?
It has been exactly a year and a week since I have seen my company live in the studio because of the pandemic. We have been working on projects virtually. I've been created 10 short films, which we'll be releasing in April. And but we have not been dance making in the traditional sense. We are about to head back into rehearsal for the first time in May, which I'm kind of thrilled about. And I don't have a thought in my head and I don't care. I'm just kind of eager to be back in the studio with a group of dancers who have inspired me for many years. It's a family. My company has always felt like a family to myself. And to slowly begin the process of getting to know each other again, I think there's going to be a lot of healing and a lot of rejoicing. And I think that a peace will come out of that.
Looking forward to seeing the fruits of that.
Thank you. Me too.
Finally, we have our senior class about to graduate. Any advice for them? Something you wish you knew when you were entering the field?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is I think it's really easy when you leave a college situation where you've been trained in a certain way to believe that that is what you know, and that you're set on a certain direction because something feels good to your body or this feels right artistically to you. And I think there's great validity in that. But I think sometimes we we place our journey on hold so often, because we're so set on something that we're not always open to the full kind of pantheon of what's out there. And if I would say anything, it would be to constantly be learning and exploring, and to, and that's not just about dance and dance forms. It's about literature, and it's about film, and it's about art, and it's about politics. It's about being a complete human being out in the world, because who you are as that human being affects who you are as the artist. And you'll constantly be changing as an artist because you're constantly changing as a human being.
Well, I think that's great advice for all of us, Doug. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. And we would like to additionally thank the Choi family who has continued to support the artists in residence and visiting artists at USC Kaufman. Now, please enjoy the showing of New Works Plus.